A family devastated by uncertainty watched their baby paralyzed with no hope of improvement. A small dog, always by the crib, began to act strangely. That night, something unexpected happened. What the baby did next left doctors and scientists without explanation. Before hearing this moving story, don't forget to like the video and share this message of hope. Night was falling silently over the residential neighborhood of Oak Grove in Springfield, Illinois. The streets were quiet, with only the occasional rustling of tree leaves breaking the silence. In a two-story house, painted in soft shades of blue and white, a faint light shone through the second-floor window. Inside the room, decorated with tenderness and hope, little Ethan, just 6 months old, slept in his crib. The moon-shaped nightlight cast a soft glow over the baby's angelic face, but the serenity of the scene contrasted drastically with the anguish that hung in the air. Seated in an armchair in the corner of the room, Sarah and Michael, Ethan's parents, watched their son with looks heavy with worry and exhaustion. Sarah, a 32-year-old woman with brown hair and green eyes, held her husband's hand tightly, as if seeking there a last thread of hope. Michael, 35, tall and broad-shouldered, tried to maintain a strong expression, but his eyes betrayed the fear and frustration he felt. 3 months ago, their lives had been turned upside down. What started as an ordinary day turned into the beginning of a nightmare when they realized that Ethan, until then an active and smiley baby, wasn't moving as he should. At first, they thought it was just a phase, but it soon became clear that something was terribly wrong. The following days were a whirlwind of medical consultations, exams, and specialists. Each new doctor brought with them the promise of answers, only to leave them with more questions and an inconclusive diagnosis. The only certainty was Ethan's condition. His body was paralyzed, unable to perform the normal movements for a baby his age. "We've consulted every possible specialist," Sarah whispered, her voice breaking slightly, "and none of them can give us a concrete answer." Michael squeezed his wife's hand, swallowing hard before responding. "I know, honey, but we can't give up. There must be someone somewhere who can help us." At that moment, a movement at the door caught the couple's attention. Buddy, the family's little mixed-breed dog, silently entered the room. The puppy, a ball of caramel-colored fur with big brown eyes, had been adopted by Sarah and Michael a few weeks before Ethan's birth. From the beginning, Buddy had shown a special attachment to the baby, always attentive and protective. Buddy approached the crib, rising on his hind legs to look at Ethan. His intelligent eyes seemed to study the baby with an almost human intensity. After a few moments, the dog turned his attention to Sarah and Michael, barking softly. "Shh, Buddy," Sarah whispered, getting up to move the dog away from the crib. "You'll wake Ethan." But Buddy seemed determined. He ran back to the door, looked at the couple, and then returned to the crib. This back and forth continued for a few minutes, with the dog seeming increasingly agitated. "What's gotten into him?" Michael asked, frowning. Sarah shrugged, too tired to try to understand the animal's strange behavior. He must be hungry or wanting to go for a walk. Buddy, however, didn't give up. He positioned himself next to the crib and began to gently nudge the bars with his nose, looking fixedly at Ethan. It was then that something extraordinary happened. In the silence of the room, interrupted only by Ethan's soft breathing and the small sounds Buddy was making, there was an almost imperceptible movement. The fingers of Ethan's right hand, which had remained motionless for months, trembled slightly. Sarah, who was about to take Buddy out of the room, froze in place. Her eyes widened, fixed on her son's hand. "Michael," she whispered, barely daring to breathe. "Did you see that?" Michael was already on his feet, leaning over the crib. "What? What was it?" he asked, his voice a mixture of anxiety and hope. "His hand. I swear I saw his fingers move," Sarah replied, her voice trembling. As if responding to his mother's words, Ethan moved his fingers again. This time, the movement was more pronounced, his little fingers slowly opening and closing. Sarah's heart raced, a wave of emotions washing over her. Joy, hope, fear, everything mixed in her chest as she watched, incredulous. her son perform a movement that doctors had said was impossible. "My God," Michael murmured, his voice choked. "He's moving. Sarah, our son is moving." Tears began to stream down Sarah's face as she leaned over the crib, taking Ethan's little hand in hers. "That's right, my love," she whispered to the baby. "You can do it. Mommy and Daddy are here." Buddy, sensing the change in the room's atmosphere, began to wag his tail furiously, his eyes alternating between the baby and his owners. For several minutes, the couple stood there, watching in wonder at every small movement Ethan made. It was as if a miracle was happening before their eyes, defying all the grim predictions they had heard in recent months. "We need to call Dr. Thompson," Michael finally said, referring to the neurologist who had been following Ethan's case. "Hy needs to see this." Sarah nodded, still unable to take her eyes off her son. "Yes, but let's wait until tomorrow. I don't want anything to interrupt this moment." Michael agreed, wrapping his arms around his wife. Together they stood there watching their son, their hearts full of a hope they hadn't felt in months. Buddy, as if satisfied with his accomplished mission, settled at the foot of the crib, his attentive eyes fixed on Ethan. That night, while the city slept outside, a new chapter began in the life of this small family. What seemed to be the end of all hope turned into the beginning of an incredible journey. A journey of recovery, of love, and of a special bond between a baby and his faithful canine companion. Little did they know that this was just the beginning. In the days and weeks that would follow, Ethan would continue to surprise them, defying all medical expectations, and by his side, always vigilant and protective, would be Buddy, the unlikely four-legged hero who somehow seemed to have been the catalyst for this miracle. The night advanced, and with it, a new hope blossomed. The tea. Silence of the house was now filled no longer with sadness, but with contained joy, and an anxious expectation for what tomorrow would bring. Sarah and Michael, exhausted but invigorated, finally allowed themselves to dream again of a bright future for their son. And so, under the soft glow of the moon-shaped nightlight, the family fell asleep, united by the promise of a new beginning. Fate indeed had other plans for them, plans that would unfold in ways none of them could have imagined on that transformative night. Thank you for the reminder. I'll continue the translation from where I left off, maintaining the same level of detail and faithfulness to the original text. Here's the next part of the story. The sun had barely risen when Sarah opened her eyes, her heart racing with the memory of the previous night's events. For a moment, she feared it had all been a dream, a cruel illusion created by her mind, desperate for hope. But as she looked at the crib, she saw Buddy still lying at its feet, faithfully standing guard. With hesitant steps, she approached the crib. Ethan was awake, his big blue eyes fixed on her. And then, as if to confirm that the previous night had not been a dream, the baby moved his little hand, slowly opening and closing his fingers. "Michael!" Sarah called, her voice trembling with emotion. "Michael, come quick!" Michael ran into the room, his hair disheveled and eyes still sleepy. "What is it? Did something happen?" "Look," Sarah whispered, pointing to Ethan. "He's still moving." The couple watched amazed as their son continued to wiggle his fingers, the movement still weak but undeniably present. Michael grabbed the phone, his hands trembling slightly as he dialed Dr. Thompson's number. "Dr. Thompson, this is Michael, Ethan's father. Sorry to call so early, but something incredible has happened. Ethan, he's moving." On the other end of the line, the doctor seemed skeptical. "Michael, I understand your excitement, but we need to be cautious. Involuntary movements can happen even in cases of severe paralysis." "No, doctor, you don't understand," Michael insisted. "These are controlled movements. He's opening and closing his fingers. Please, can you come see?" After a moment of silence, the doctor agreed to make an emergency house call. The following hours were a whirlwind of emotions and activity. Dr. Thompson arrived, accompanied by a team of specialists. They examined Ethan thoroughly, conducting tests and observations, their faces a mixture of disbelief and fascination. "This is extraordinary," Dr. Thompson finally declared, taking off his glasses and rubbing his eyes as if not believing what he was seeing. "There's no medical explanation for this sudden improvement. The tests we did just a week ago showed complete paralysis." Sarah, who was holding Ethan in her arms, looked at the doctor with tear-filled eyes. "What does this mean, doctor? Will our son be okay?" Dr. Thompson hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "It's too early to make any predictions, Mrs. Walker. What we're seeing here is frankly unprecedented. We'll need to monitor Ethan closely and conduct a series of new tests." As the doctors discussed among themselves, Buddy approached Sarah, gently nuzzling Ethan's leg. The baby, as if responding to the dog's touch, moved his little leg slightly. "Look!" Michael exclaimed, pointing to the movement. "Did you see that?" The doctors turned just in time to see Ethan move his leg again. Dr. Thompson approached, examining the baby with renewed interest. "This was remarkable. It seems the movements are not limited to just the hands." Sarah looked at Buddy, an idea forming in her mind. "Doctor, this might sound crazy, but I think it has something to do with our dog. Last night, it was Buddy who first noticed that Ethan was moving." The doctor frowned, clearly skeptical. "Mrs. Walker, I understand you're looking for explanations, but—" "No, listen," Michael intervened. "We know it sounds absurd, but ever since Ethan got sick, Buddy has been acting differently. He's always near the crib, always alert. And last night, he was restless until we noticed Ethan's movement." Dr. Thompson sighed, running his hand through his gray hair. "Look, I won't deny that there are documented cases of animals showing unusual sensitivity to medical conditions. Dogs, in particular, have been trained to detect epileptic seizures and even certain types of cancer. But this is different." At eyes. That moment, as if to prove a point, Buddy stood up and began to gently lick Ethan's hand. To the amazement of everyone in the room, the baby responded with a slight movement of his arm. "My God," one of the nurses murmured. Dr. Thompson moved closer, closely observing the interaction between the dog and the baby. "This is fascinating. I've never seen anything like it in all my years of practice." In the days that followed, Sarah and Michael's house was transformed into an impromptu medical study center. Specialists from various fields came to examine Ethan, all intrigued by his seemingly miraculous recovery. Imaging tests, neurological exams, and physical evaluations were conducted, each bringing more questions than answers. What became clear, however, was that Buddy's presence seemed to have a positive effect on Ethan's movements. Whenever the dog was nearby, the baby showed more motor activity. "It's as if Buddy is somehow stimulating Ethan's nervous system," one of the neurologists commented, observing how the baby reacted to the dog's touch. Sarah and Michael, though exhausted with all the activity and attention, felt a growing hope. Each small movement of Ethan's was celebrated as a victory. Each new development was a step towards a future that, just weeks before, had seemed impossible. One afternoon, as Sarah was cradling Ethan in her arms, with Buddy lying at her feet, she noticed something that made her heart leap. Ethan was smiling. It wasn't just a reflex or an involuntary movement. It was a genuine smile full of life and joy. "Michael," she called, her voice choked with emotion, "come see this." Michael ran into the living room, arriving in time to see his son's radiant smile. Tears streamed down the face of the normally reserved man. "My boy," he whispered, gently caressing Ethan's cheek. "You're our little fighter, aren't you?" Buddy, sensing the emotion in the air, got up and rested his head on Sarah's lap, his eyes fixed on Ethan. The baby, as if responding to the dog's presence, moved his hand towards the soft fur. "It's amazing, isn't it?" Sarah said softly. "How something as simple as the love of a pet can make such a difference." Michael nodded, hugging his family. "I think we underestimated the power of love and connection. Maybe that's what Ethan needed all along, not just medical treatments, but also warmth and unconditional affection." That night, as the family prepared for bed, there was a sense of optimism in the air that hadn't existed for months. Although the road ahead was still long and uncertain, Sarah and Michael felt they had rediscovered something precious: hope. Lying in their bed, with Ethan sleeping peacefully in his crib and Buddy faithfully standing guard, the couple reflected on the extraordinary journey they were experiencing. "You know," Sarah whispered, nestling in Michael's arms, "I think we're witnessing a true miracle." Michael softly kissed his wife's forehead. "Yes, we are, and I have a feeling this is just the beginning." As the couple fell asleep, lulled by their son's soft breathing and Buddy's occasional contented sigh, the future, which had once seemed so bleak, now shone with possibilities. Ethan's journey was far from over, but with the love of his family and the inexplicable dedication of his faithful canine companion, it seemed that nothing was impossible. The chapter of hopelessness had closed, and a new story full of promises and miracles was just beginning to be written. Thank you for the reminder. I'll continue the translation from where I left off, maintaining the same level of detail and faithfulness to the original text. Here's the next part of the story. Yes, weeks turned into months, and life in the Walker household took on a new rhythm. Ethan's room, once a place of sadness and worry, was now the stage for small daily victories. Sarah and Michael's routine revolved around their son's progress and frequent visits from doctors and therapists, all still intrigued by the baby's unprecedented recovery. On a sunny Saturday morning, Sarah woke to the sound of laughter coming from Ethan's room. Intrigued, she got up quietly, not wanting to wake Michael, who had finally managed to rest after a stressful week at work. As she approached the door of the room, the scene she saw filled her heart with joy. Ethan was sitting in his crib, something that seemed impossible just a few months ago, and was playing animatedly with Buddy. The dog, with his front paws resting on the crib's railing, was wagging his tail frantically while Ethan tried to reach him with his little hands. "Good morning, my loves," Sarah said softly, entering the room. Hearing his mother's voice, Ethan turned his head in her direction, another movement that was previously beyond his capabilities. His eyes lit up, and a big smile spread across his little face. "Ma! Ma!" Ethan babbled, to Sarah's complete astonishment. She froze in place, hardly believing what she had just heard. "Ethan, did you speak?" As if to confirm, Ethan repeated, "Mama!" this time louder and clearer. Sarah ran to the crib, tears of joy streaming down her face as she picked up her son. "Michael!" she shouted. "Michael, come quick!" Michael rushed into the room, alarmed by his wife's shout. "What is it? What happened?" "He spoke, Michael," Sarah exclaimed, her voice choked with emotion. "Our son spoke." As if understanding the importance of the moment, Ethan looked at his father and with a smile said again, "Da-da." Michael stood gaping, his eyes filling with tears. He approached, hugging Sarah and Ethan, forming a circle of love and joy. Buddy, not wanting to be left out, jumped excitedly around them, barking happily. It's unbelievable," Michael managed to say between tears of happiness. "Just a few months ago, doctors were telling us he might never move or speak, and now—" Sarah nodded, unable to form words. She just hugged Ethan tighter, feeling his little body full of life and movement. The rest of the day was filled with emotional phone calls to family and friends, all wanting to share in the Walker family's joy. Dr. Thompson, upon being informed of the new development, insisted on making an immediate visit. "This is simply extraordinary," the doctor declared. After examining Ethan, the speed at which he's regaining his motor functions and now linguistic, it's something I've never seen in my entire career. Sarah, who was sitting with Ethan in her lap and Buddy at her feet, looked at the doctor curiously. "Dr. Thompson, do you think that there might be some explanation for this, something we might have done differently?" The doctor took off his glasses, cleaning them thoughtfully before responding. "Mrs. Walker, in medicine we learn to be skeptical, to seek scientific explanations for everything. But sometimes we encounter cases that defy our understanding." Paused, looking at Buddy, who kept his eyes fixed on Ethan. "I can't scientifically explain the role this dog seems to play in Ethan's recovery, but I can't deny what I'm seeing. The connection between them, the positive effect his presence has on Ethan, it's something that deserves further study. Michael, who was standing by the window, turned to the doctor. "What does this mean for Ethan's future, Doctor? Will he recover completely?" Dr. Thompson sighed, carefully weighing his words. "Mr. Walker, what we're seeing here is unprecedented. Based on the progress Ethan has made, I'd say there are reasons to be very optimistic, however," he added, raising a hand in caution. "We still have a long road ahead. Each case is unique, and we can't predict with certainty how the long-term recovery will be." Sarah and Michael exchanged glances, a mixture of hope and apprehension in their eyes. They knew that Ethan's journey was far from over, but each new progress was a victory to be celebrated. In the days that followed, the Walker house became a veritable research center. Specialists from various fields, neurologists, physiotherapists, psychologists, and even ethologists interested in the relationship between Ethan and Buddy, came to observe and study the extraordinary case. One afternoon, as Sarah watched Ethan playing on the living room rug with Buddy always by his side, she noticed something that made her hold her breath. Ethan, leaning on Buddy, was trying to stand up. "Michael," she called, her voice barely containing the emotion, "come see this." Michael ran to the living room, arriving in time to see his son, with a look of determination on his face, use Buddy's body as support to lift himself on his shaky legs. For a magical moment, Ethan stood, his little legs wobbling but firm enough to support his weight. He looked at his parents, a radiant smile lighting up his face, before falling gently onto the rug, laughing. Sarah and Michael looked at each other, tears of joy in their eyes. No words were necessary to express what they felt at that moment. It was another miracle, another proof that love, hope, and determination could overcome even the bleakest prognoses. Buddy, as if understanding the importance of the moment, barked happily and licked Ethan's face, making the baby giggle. That night, after Ethan finally fell asleep, exhausted after a day full of new achievements, Sarah and Michael sat on the house's porch looking at the stars. "Did you ever imagine," Sarah said softly, "that our life would change so much in such a short time?" Michael took his wife's hand, squeezing it gently. "No," he answered, "but I'm grateful for every moment of this incredible journey." They remained silent for a moment, absorbing the peace of the night and the gratitude they felt. "You know," Michael finally said, "I think we've learned an important lesson from all this." Sarah looked at him curious. "What lesson?" "That we should never lose hope," he replied, his eyes shining with emotion. "That love, whether it's from parents to a child or from an animal to its owner, can work miracles." Sarah nodded, leaning back on her husband's shoulder. "And that sometimes heroes come in unexpected forms," she added, thinking of Buddy. As the couple watched the starry sky, they felt a deep gratitude for everything they had experienced and an excited expectation for the future. Ethan's journey was far from over, but with the love of his family and the inexplicable dedication of his faithful canine companion, it seemed that nothing was impossible. The universe, in its infinite wisdom, had chosen to bless them with a miracle, and they were determined to honor this gift, living each day with gratitude, love, and an unshakable faith in the power of hope. Thank you for the reminder. I'll continue the translation from where I left off, maintaining the same level of detail and faithfulness to the original text. Here's the next part of the story. Fall arrived, painting the neighborhood trees in shades of red and gold. In the Walker house, the changes were even more notable. Ethan, now almost a year and a half old, continued to surprise everyone with his progress. On a cool Saturday afternoon, the family was gathered in the backyard. Michael had set up a small inflatable pool, and Ethan, sitting in the shallow water, was clapping his hands happily, splashing water everywhere. Buddy, as always, was nearby, circling the pool with an attentive and protective look. "Just look at him, Sarah," Michael commented, smiling as he watched his son having fun. "Who would have thought we'd get here?" Sarah, who was arranging some floating toys in the pool, nodded with tears in her eyes. "It's amazing, isn't it? Every day is a new surprise." Suddenly, Ethan raised his arms towards Buddy, who was at the edge of the pool. "Woof, woof," he exclaimed, one of his favorite words lately. What happened next made the parents' hearts race. Supporting himself on the edge of the pool, Ethan began to stand up, his little legs trembling with the effort. Buddy, sensing the boy's intention, moved closer, offering his body as support. "Oh my God," Sarah whispered, frozen in place. "Michael, he's—" "Shh!" Michael hushed, not wanting to break the moment with words. With determination in his eyes, Ethan finally managed to stand up. For a few seconds he stood there, precariously balancing, his little hands grasping Buddy's fur. Then, to his parents' astonishment, he took a hesitant step out of the pool. "He's walking," Sarah shouted, unable to contain her emotion. "Michael, our son is walking." Michael was already moving, ready to catch Ethan if he fell. But it wasn't necessary. With Buddy by his side, serving as a living support, Ethan took 2 more steps before falling, sitting on the grass, laughing happily. The backyard exploded in a mixture of laughter, barking, and tears of joy. Sarah and Michael ran to hug Ethan, covering him with kisses and words of encouragement. Buddy jumped around them, barking excitedly, as if he understood the magnitude of the moment. "We need to film this," Michael said, wiping away tears. "No one will believe it if we don't see it." In the days that followed, the Walker house became a true celebration center. Family and friends came to visit, all eager to witness Ethan's miraculous progress. Dr. Thompson, upon being informed of the news, insisted on making an immediate visit. "This is extraordinary," the doctor declared, watching Ethan take hesitant steps across the room, always with Buddy by his side. "In my entire career, I've never seen such a rapid and complete recovery from such a severe case." Sarah, who was sitting on the couch with Michael, looked at the doctor curiously. "Dr. Thompson, do you think Ethan will, that he'll develop normally from now on?" The doctor took off his glasses, cleaning them thoughtfully before answering. "Mrs. Walker, given the unprecedented nature of this case, it's difficult to make definitive predictions. However, based on what we're seeing, I have reasons to be very optimistic. Ethan has not only regained movements we thought impossible, but he's also reaching developmental milestones appropriate for his age." Michael leaned forward, his voice heavy with emotion. "And what about the future, Doctor? Will there be sequelae?" "That's an important question, Mr. Walker," Dr. Thompson answered carefully. "Although Ethan's recovery is remarkable, we'll still need to monitor him closely in the coming years. There may be subtle challenges that will only become apparent as he grows. However," he added with a smile, "given what we've seen, I'd say Ethan has every chance of leading a full and normal life." At that moment, as if to confirm the doctor's words, Ethan toddled over to Buddy, grabbed onto the dog's fur, and took several confident steps across the room. "Da-da! Ma-ma! Woof, woof!" he exclaimed happily, pointing to each of them. Dr. Thompson shook his head, marveling. "And as for cognitive and language development, well, it seems Ethan is progressing admirably." After the doctor's departure, Sarah and Michael sat on the living room carpet, watching Ethan play with Buddy. The boy laughed as he tried to stack colored blocks, occasionally knocking them down and starting over with determination. "He's amazing, isn't he?" Sarah whispered, leaning back on Michael's shoulder. Michael nodded, putting his arm around his wife. "Yes, he is. And to think that a few months ago—" His voice faltered, the memories of the dark days still fresh in his mind. Sarah squeezed, his hand understanding without words what he felt. "You know," she said after a moment, "I think all of this has taught us something important." Michael looked at her, curious. "What?" "That miracles exist," Sarah replied, her eyes shining. "That love, hope, and faith can overcome even the bleakest prognoses. And that sometimes guardian angels come in unexpected forms." She looked lovingly at Buddy, who was lying patiently while Ethan used his body as support to stand up once more. Michael smiled, following his wife's gaze. "You're right. I think we underestimated the power of unconditional love. Whether it's from parents to a child or from a dog to his little human," Sarah completed, laughing softly. That night, after Ethan finally fell asleep, Exhausted after a day full of new achievements, Sarah and Michael spent some extra time by the crib. Buddy, as always, was lying. At the foot of the crib, his eyes attentive even in the dark. "Thank you," Michael whispered, leaning down to pat Buddy's ears. "For everything." The dog looked at him, his intelligent eyes seeming to understand the weight of those words. He wagged his tail softly, as if responding. As they quietly left the room, Sarah and Michael exchanged a look full of love and gratitude. Their journey was far from over, but now more than ever they faced the future with courage and hope. Outside, the autumn night was clear, the stars shining brightly in the sky. It was as if the universe was celebrating with them, reminding them that sometimes the greatest miracles come in the most unexpected packages. And so, cradled by the love of a family and the dedication of a faithful four-legged friend, Ethan's extraordinary story continued to unfold, promising a bright future full of possibilities. Thank you for the reminder. I'll continue the translation from where I left off, maintaining the same level of detail and faithfulness to the original text. Here's the next part of the story. Time passed quickly, and before the Walker family realized it, 2 years had gone by since that fateful night when Ethan showed his first signs of recovery. Now at 3 years old, the boy was the embodiment of joy and energy. It was a spring morning and the backyard of the Walker house was in full bloom. Sarah watched from the kitchen window as Ethan ran across the lawn, chasing butterflies and laughing gleefully. Buddy, now a bit older but still full of life, followed closely, always attentive to every movement of the boy. "Mommy, look!" Ethan shouted, pointing to a blue butterfly that had landed on a nearby flower. "It's so beautiful!" Sarah smiled, marveling not just at the beauty of the scene, but at the clarity with which her son spoke. The doctors had warned about possible speech delays due to his previous condition, but Ethan continued to surprise everyone with his development. Michael entered the kitchen, adjusting his tie. "Good. Morning, honey," he said, giving Sarah a kiss. "How are our 2 adventurers today?" "See for yourself," Sarah replied, pointing to the backyard. Michael approached the window, a smile spreading across his face as he watched Ethan and Buddy playing. "That's incredible, isn't it? Sometimes I still have to pinch myself to believe all this is real." Sarah nodded, her eyes filling with tears of happiness. "Every day is a gift," she whispered. At that moment, the phone rang. It was Dr. Thompson, calling to confirm Ethan's follow-up appointment that afternoon. "Remember," the doctor's voice sounded through the phone, "today we'll be conducting a series of cognitive and motor tests. It's important for us to assess Ethan's long-term progress." Sarah felt a knot in her stomach. Despite all of Ethan's advances, she still got anxious about these evaluations. "We'll be there, doctor," she responded, trying to keep her voice steady. "After." Hanging up, she turned to Michael, who immediately embraced her. "Everything will be fine," he whispered in her ear. "Our boy is strong. He'll do well." In the afternoon, the family arrived at Dr. Thompson's office. Ethan, oblivious to the importance of the tests, was excited about the idea of playing games with the doctor. Buddy, who had become a constant presence in Ethan's life, was allowed to accompany them thanks to a special permission from the hospital. Dr. Thompson greeted the family with a warm smile. "Hello, Ethan. Ready to play a bit with me today?" Ethan nodded enthusiastically. "Yes, and can Buddy play too?" The doctor laughed. "Of course. Buddy is a very important part of your story, isn't he?" The tests began. Ethan was subjected to a series of assessments, from solving puzzles to drawing shapes and answering questions. Sarah and Michael watched anxiously, holding each other's hands for comfort. As the tests progressed, Dr. Thompson took notes, his expression alternating between concentration and surprise. Buddy remained by Ethan's side the whole time, offering silent support. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Dr. Thompson concluded the tests. He turned to Sarah and Michael, a broad smile on his face. "Well, I have to say, the results are extraordinary," he announced. "Not only is Ethan within normal parameters for his age in all areas evaluated, but in some aspects he's even above average." Sarah let out a sigh of relief. tears of joy streaming down her face. Michael hugged her tightly, equally emotional. "What does this mean, Doctor?" Michael asked, his voice choked. Dr. Thompson took off his glasses, cleaning them thoughtfully. "It means that against all odds, Ethan has not only fully recovered but is thriving. His cognitive, motor and social development is on track. To be frank," he added with a smile, "if I didn't know Ethan's medical history, I would never guess that he went through such an ordeal in his first months of life." Ethan, oblivious to the importance of the conversation, was happily playing, with Buddy in the corner of the room. The dog, as always, responded with patience and affection to each of the boys' gestures. "And what about the future?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling with emotion. Are there any long-term concerns?" Dr. Thompson smiled gently. "Of course, we'll continue to monitor Ethan regularly, but based on what we're seeing, I have every reason to be optimistic. Ethan has every chance of leading a full and healthy life." At that moment, Ethan approached, holding a drawing he had made. "Look, Mommy, I drew our family." Sarah took the drawing, her heart overflowing with love. On the paper, depicted in meeting, a childlike but recognizable way, were her, Michael, Ethan, and of course Buddy. "It's beautiful, my love," she said, hugging her son. Dr. Thompson observed the scene with a smile. "You know," he commented, "in all my years of medical practice, I've never seen anything like Ethan's case. It's a true miracle." Michael, with his arm around Sarah, nodded. "Yes, it is a miracle, and we have so much to be thankful for." He looked at Buddy, who was sitting patiently next to Ethan. The dog returned the look, his intelligent eyes seeming to understand the depth of the moment. As they left the office, the Walker family was radiant. The future, which once seemed so bleak, now shone with infinite possibilities. "What do you say we go get some ice cream to celebrate?" Michael suggested. "Yes!" Ethan shouted excitedly. "And can Buddy have some too?" Sarah laughed. "Well, maybe we can buy a special treat for Buddy at the pet shop." As they walked down the sunny street, Ethan between his parents and Buddy trotting faithfully beside them, Sarah couldn't help but reflect on the incredible journey they had been through. From moments of total despair to a joy beyond their wildest expectations, every step had been a lesson in love, hope, and perseverance, and at the center of it all was Buddy, the unlikely four-legged hero who had brought light into their lives when all seemed lost. "Thank you," Sarah whispered, leaning down to pat Buddy's ears. The dog looked up at her, wagging his tail as if he perfectly understood what she meant. At that moment, under the blue spring sky with Ethan's laughter echoing in the air, Sarah knew that no matter what the future held, they would face it together, as a family that had learned the hard way that miracles exist and that sometimes they come in the most unexpected forms. "Thank you for the reminder. I'll continue the translation from where I left off, maintaining the same level of detail and faithfulness to the original text. Here's the next part of the story. The years passed quickly and Ethan was about to turn 6. The Walker house was bustling with preparations for the boy's birthday party, which would coincide with his first day of elementary school. Sarah was in the kitchen, putting the finishing touches on a dog-shaped cake, a special tribute to Buddy, when she heard laughter coming from the backyard. Looking out the window, she saw Ethan running with his neighborhood friends, Buddy happily accompanying the group of children. Michael entered the kitchen, carrying a box full of decorations. "Can you believe it, Sarah? Our boy is starting school tomorrow." Sarah smiled, although her eyes were misty. "It seems like it was just yesterday that we were in the hospital, not knowing if he—" Her voice faltered, the memories of those difficult days still capable of moving her. Michael hugged her from behind, planting a soft kiss on her cheek. "But look at him now," Michael said, pointing to the backyard. "Running, laughing, ready to conquer the world." At that moment, Ethan came running into the kitchen, Buddy at his heels. "Mommy, Daddy, can I take Buddy to school tomorrow?" Sarah knelt down to be at her son's level. "Oh, sweetie, unfortunately we can't take Buddy to school, but he'll be waiting for you when you get back, I'm sure." Ethan's face contorted into a frown of disappointment. "But what if I need him? What if—" His voice trailed off, a trace of fear passing through his eyes. Michael crouched down next to Sarah. Ethan, remember what we talked about? You're a strong and brave boy. You'll do great in school. But what if I can't do things like the other kids? Ethan asked, his voice trembling slightly. Sarah felt her heart tighten. Despite all of Ethan's progress, sometimes the fear that his past condition might affect his future still loomed over the family. Ethan, look at me, Sarah said softly. You're capable of doing anything you want. Remember how you learned to walk, to talk. You've overcome so many things, my love. School will just be another adventure. Buddy, sensing Ethan's anxiety, approached and gently licked the boy's hand. Ethan smiled, patting the dog's head. Okay, he said, looking a bit more confident, but can I take a picture of Buddy with me? Michael smiled. Of course you can, champ. How about we take a special photo right now? The family gathered in the backyard, with Ethan hugging Buddy while Michael took the picture. The radiant smile on the boy's face was living proof of how much he had overcome. The next day, the house woke up early, buzzing with the excitement of the first day of school. Ethan, dressed in his new uniform, seemed a mixture of excitement and nervousness. Before leaving, he knelt down beside Buddy. "Take care of the house for me, Buddy," he said, hugging the dog. "I'll be back soon." At the school gate, Sarah and Michael said goodbye to Ethan with a tight hug. "Remember, son," Michael said, "you're stronger and braver than you imagine." Ethan nodded, clutching the photo of Buddy in his pocket. With a final wave, he entered the school, blending into the crowd of excited children. Sarah held Michael's hand, silent tears streaming down her face. "He'll be okay, won't he?" she whispered. Michael hugged her. "Yes, he will, honey. Our boy is a fighter." The hours dragged on for Sarah and Michael. At home, Buddy seemed to sense Ethan's absence, becoming restless and frequently looking at the door. Finally, it was time to pick up Ethan. When the boy came out through the school gate, his face was lit up with a huge smile. "Mommy." "Daddy," he shouted, running into his parents' arms. "It was amazing. I made new friends and the teacher is really nice." On the way home, Ethan talked non-stop about his day, his eyes shining with excitement. When they arrived, Buddy greeted them with happy barks and enthusiastic licks. "Buddy," Ethan exclaimed, hugging the dog, "you won't believe the day I had." That night, as she tucked Ethan into bed, Sarah noticed the photo of Buddy carefully placed on the nightstand. "Did you need to look at the photo today?" she asked softly. Ethan smiled, shaking his head. "No, Mommy. But I liked knowing it was there. It made me feel brave." Sarah kissed her son's forehead, her heart overflowing with love and pride. "You're the bravest boy I know, Ethan. Sleep well, my love." As she left the room, she found Michael in the hallway. They hugged in silence, the emotions of the day finally catching up with them. "He did it," Michael whispered. "Our boy really did it." Sarah nodded, unable to speak through tears of joy. They looked at Buddy, who was lying faithfully at Ethan's bedroom door. "You know," Michael said, "I think we owe a lot to this dog. He not only helped Ethan recover, but he continues to be his strength and comfort." Sarah smiled, leaning down to pat Buddy. "He's more than a pet. He's a four-legged guardian angel." That night, the Walker house was enveloped in an atmosphere of peace and gratitude. Ethan slept peacefully, dreaming of the new adventures that school would bring. Buddy kept faithful watch, as he always did, and Sarah and Michael embraced. In their bed, reflected on the incredible journey they had traveled. From such a dark and desperate beginning, they had reached a place of joy, hope, and infinite possibilities. And at the center of it all was love, the love of parents for a child, the unconditional love of a pet, and the healing power that love could have. As they fell asleep, Sarah and Michael knew that no matter what the future held, they would face it together as a family. A family that had learned that miracles exist, that hope should never be abandoned, and that sometimes the most unlikely heroes can make the biggest difference. And outside, under the starry sky, life continued its course, promising new challenges, new joys and perhaps new miracles for Ethan's extraordinary journey and his faithful four-legged companion. Thank you for the reminder. I'll continue the translation from where I left off, maintaining the same level of detail and faithfulness to the original text. Here's the next part of the story. The years passed quickly, and Ethan was now 12 years old. The fragile boy, who once struggled to move, had transformed into a pre-teen full of energy and curiosity. His light brown hair, always tousled, framed bright eyes that seemed to absorb the world around him. It was a sunny Saturday afternoon, and the Walker family was gathered in the backyard. Michael was busy preparing the grill while Sarah arranged the table for lunch. Ethan, as usual, was playing with Buddy, now an elderly dog, but still full of love and devotion. "Ethan, honey," Sarah called, "can you help me bring the salads from the kitchen?" "Sure, Mom," Ethan replied, running into the house with Buddy at his heels. As Ethan picked up the salad bowls, he noticed that Buddy seemed a bit slower than usual. The dog paused at the foot of the stairs, as if gathering strength to climb up. "You okay, Buddy?" Ethan asked, kneeling beside his faithful companion. Buddy looked at him with tired but affectionate eyes and wagged his tail slightly. Ethan felt a tightness in his heart. He knew Buddy was aging, but the idea that his friend might one day not be there was something he refused to consider. "Come on, Buddy," he said softly, carefully picking up the dog. "Let's go down together." Returning to the backyard, Ethan put the salads on the table and then turned to his parents, concern evident on his face. "Mom, Dad," he began hesitantly, "do you think Buddy is okay? He seems tired." Sarah and Michael exchanged worried glances. They too had noticed the changes in Buddy over the past few months. Michael approached, placing a comforting hand on his son's shoulder. "Ethan, remember when we talked about the cycle of life? Buddy is an old dog now. It's natural for him to get slower and more tired." Ethan nodded slowly, his eyes filling with tears. "But he'll be okay, won't he? He can't leave us." Sarah joined them, enveloping Ethan in a tight hug. "Oh dear, Buddy has had a long and happy life full of love, and he's still here with us. Let's enjoy every moment with him, okay?" At that instant, as if sensing Ethan's sadness, Buddy approached, nuzzling the boy's hand with his nose. Ethan knelt down, hugging the dog tightly. "I love you, Buddy," he whispered. "You're the best friend I could have." The rest of the day passed in a bittersweet mood. The family made sure to give extra attention to Buddy, pampering him with special treats and lots of affection. Ethan remained by the dog's side the whole time, as if wanting to savor every second. In the evening, as everyone was preparing for bed, Ethan made an unusual request. "Can I sleep here in the living room with Buddy tonight?" he asked his parents. Sarah and Michael exchanged understanding looks. "Of course, son," Michael replied. "I'll get some blankets for you." Ethan settled on the couch, with Buddy lying on the rug beside him. The boy reached out, gently stroking the dog's ears. "Remember when I was little, Buddy?" Ethan whispered. "You were always there for me. You always helped me when I needed it. I don't know what would have become of me without you." Buddy raised his head, his tired but love-filled eyes meeting Ethan's. The dog gave a soft bark as if responding. "Promise you'll stay with me forever?" Ethan asked, his voice choked. Buddy made an effort to stand up and climbed onto the couch, nestling next to Ethan. The boy hugged him, silent tears streaming down his face. From the living room door, Sarah and Michael watched the scene, their own eyes misty. They knew difficult days were ahead, but they also knew that the love between Ethan and Buddy was something special, something that transcended time and circumstances. In the days that followed, Ethan devoted every free moment to Buddy. He researched care for elderly dogs, insisted on accompanying all veterinary visits, and even started preparing special meals for his canine friend. One afternoon, as Ethan was reading a book in the backyard with Buddy lying at his feet, Sarah approached. "Son," she said softly, "I'm very proud of you. The way you're taking care of Buddy, it's very special." Ethan looked up, a sad smile on his face. "He always took care of me, Mum. Now it's my turn to take care of him." Sarah sat down next to her son, putting her arm around his shoulders. You know, Ethan, the love you and Buddy share, it's something rare and precious. No matter what happens, that love will always be a part of you. Ethan nodded, hugging Buddy. I know, Mum, and I'm grateful for every day we have together. That night, as the family had dinner, Michael raised his glass in a toast. To Buddy, he said, our four-legged hero who taught us the true meaning of unconditional love and loyalty. Everyone raised their glasses, even Ethan, who had tears in his eyes but a smile on his face. To Buddy, they said in unison. And outside, under the stars that were beginning to dot the night sky, Buddy rested peacefully, surrounded by the love of the family he had helped to heal and unite. His journey was far from over, but the legacy of love, hope, and miracles he had created would live forever in the hearts of those he touched. The story of Ethan and Buddy was more than just that of a boy and his dog. It was a testament to the power of love, the resilience of the human spirit, and the way the deepest connections can transcend all barriers, even those between species. It was a story of hope, of healing, and of miracles, a story that would continue to inspire and move people for many years to come. Thank you for the reminder. I'll continue the translation from where I left off, maintaining the same level of detail and faithfulness to the original text. Here's the next part of the story. Time passed, the seasons changed, and Ethan was now 15 years old. The boy who had once struggled to move a finger had transformed into a tall, athletic teenager, with a warm smile that resembled his father's and expressive eyes like his mother's. It was an autumn afternoon, and golden leaves danced in the wind. As Ethan walked home from school, his steps were slow, meditative, as if each step took him not just home but through the memories of a lifetime. Upon arriving home, Ethan was greeted by silence. Buddy, who used to run to the door barking happily, didn't come. Ethan's heart tightened, remembering that his faithful friend had passed away just 2 weeks ago. I'm home, he called softly, his voice echoing in the quiet house. Sarah appeared in the kitchen doorway, a gentle smile on her face. Hi, sweetie, how was school? Ethan shrugged, letting his backpack fall to the floor. It was normal, I guess. Sarah approached, hugging her son. She could feel the sadness that still lingered over him. Your father and I have a surprise for you, she said softly. It's in your room. Intrigued, Ethan climbed the stairs. As he opened his bedroom door, he froze. There on his bed was a large photo album he had never seen before. Michael was sitting in the desk chair, smiling at his son. Hey, champ, we thought it was time for you to see this. With trembling hands, Ethan picked up the album and opened it. The first photo made him gasp in surprise. It was him, still a baby, lying motionless in a hospital crib, with tubes and machines surrounding him. Is that me? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Sarah, who had entered the room, nodded, sitting down beside her son. Yes, dear. This was taken when you were about 4 months old. Ethan slowly turned the pages, watching his own story unfold before his eyes. There were photos of him in the hospital, photos of him at home, always motionless. And then, Buddy, Ethan whispered, touching a photo where the puppy was lying next to his crib. Michael joined them on the bed. That's when everything started to change, he explained. Buddy came into our lives and, somehow, awakened something in you. The following pages told a story of miracle and recovery. Ethan saw photos of himself moving his fingers for the first time, then his arms, his legs. There were photos of him sitting, crawling, and finally taking his first steps, always with Buddy by his side. Tears flowed freely down Ethan's face as he absorbed each image, each moment of his incredible journey. Why did you never show me this before? He asked, looking at his parents. Sarah smiled gently. We wanted to wait until you were older, until you could really understand and appreciate everything that happened. Michael added, and also, well, you were living your life, Ethan. Growing up, learning, being a normal kid. We didn't want the past to define who you are or who you could become. Ethan nodded slowly, understanding. He continued turning the pages, watching himself grow, always with Buddy by his side. Photos of birthdays, first days of school, soccer games. In every important moment, there was his faithful friend. When he reached the last page, Ethan paused. It was a recent photo, taken just a month before. In it, he was sitting on the backyard lawn, Buddy lying with his head on Ethan's lap. Both were looking at the camera, their eyes full of love and contentment. "This was the last photo we took of him," Ethan said softly, tracing the image with his fingers. Sarah hugged her son. "Buddy lived a long and happy life, Ethan. And much of that happiness came from you, from the love you shared." Michael put his hand on his son's shoulder. "You know, Ethan, many people spend their entire lives looking for a miracle. But you didn't just witness a miracle, you lived one. And Buddy was a crucial part of that." Ethan closed the album, hugging it to his chest. "I miss him so much," he whispered. "We know, dear," Sarah said softly. "But remember the love you shared, the bond you had. That never dies. It's always with you in every step you take, in every achievement you reach." That night, after his parents had gone to bed, Ethan stayed awake, leafing through the album once more. Each photo, each memory reaffirmed the miracle that his life had been. He paused at the last photo again, looking at Buddy's happy face. "Thank you, friend," he whispered, "for everything." As if responding to his words, a gentle breeze came through the window, making the curtains dance slightly. Ethan smiled, feeling a peace he hadn't experienced since Buddy's passing. He now knew that his story, his and Buddy's story, was more than just about overcoming or medical miracles. It was a story of unconditional love, of connections that transcend human understanding, and of the transformative power of hope. As he fell asleep, Ethan made a silent promise to himself and to Buddy's memory. He would live his life to the fullest, seizing every opportunity, facing every challenge with courage, because now he understood that every step he took, every word he spoke, every dream he pursued, was a testament to the miracle he had experienced. And somewhere, over the rainbow, he knew Buddy was watching, wagging his tail and smiling that canine smile that had changed their lives forever. End of story. Dear listeners, we hope that Ethan and Buddy's journey has touched your hearts as much as it has touched ours. This story reminds us that miracles can happen in the most unexpected moments and in the most surprising forms. To continue this emotional journey, we've prepared a special playlist with equally captivating stories about the power of love, hope, and overcoming. You can find it by clicking on the link to the left of the video. If this story moved you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and give this video a like. Every day we bring unique stories that explore the complexity and beauty of human and animal life. Share with us in the comments, what was the moment that touched you the most in this story? Have you ever experienced or witnessed a miracle in your life? Remember, sometimes heroes have 4 paws and a heart full of unconditional. Until the next story, and don't forget, always keep hope alive in your heart.